Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Whole Foods Market has Thanksgiving gatherings covered. First things first, reserve your no antibiotics ever fresh whole turkey today, starting at $2.99 a pound. Or go with their organic spiral cut bone-in ham, full of seared-in flavor. For sides, choose Whole Foods Market grab-and-go platters. Go even further and get your whole meal catered. Just order online by November 26th. Get Thanksgiving ready at Whole Foods Market. Terms apply.
Being a marketer's no sweat. You just have to manage dozens of channels, launch hundreds of campaigns, score thousands of leads, and okay, fine, it's a lot of sweat. Unless you have HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools to help you do all that and more. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
The holidays are here at the Home Depot. If you're working on getting ready for company,
a lot of company,
make sure you're ready with Black Friday savings. Get up to 40% off select appliances, plus up to an extra $1,000 off select kitchen appliances. Upgrade your kitchen with top brands like GE Profile and get sleek cutting-edge appliances to make sure you've
got hosting handled.
Yeah, you do. Get Black Friday savings now with free delivery and financing on select appliances this holiday at the Home Depot. Offer valid November 6th through December 4th. U.S. only. See store or online for details.
Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode 666 of the DBR podcast. 666, Mark of the Devil, and we're going to be talking about a loss. Kind of sucks. Anyway, I'm Jason Evans. I'm here with Donald Wine. Donald, before we get started, I want to briefly apologize a little bit. We're recording this almost 24 hours after the Kansas game ended. We just been a little delayed. You've been traveling back from Vegas. And I want to hear all about your experience in Las Vegas and at this game. I've had an insane day of Thanksgiving prep. My honey-do list was a mile long today, as it should be. Thanksgiving does not fall only to Mrs. Evans; it falls to Mr. Evans as well.
Hey,
so
look, especially for Thanksgiving, there's always a lot that goes on, and then a lot that gets added on top, and you're like, oh, it's also Wednesday, right? Like, it's not even like the actual holiday, it's the day before. Right. So yeah, I get it.
So in any event, with all that said, I want to start our conversation with you giving me some flavor from the arena, what your trip to Vegas was like, and then we'll get into more stuff about the game.
Well, let's start before the game. Because I was very excited to have a meetup with what turned out to be about 20 or so, 25 people from our listenership, and it was super awesome to see everybody. Again, it was very last minute. People were like, "Oh, thanks for doing this," and I was like, "I didn't know I was going out there until Tuesday." It was like, okay, I know Tom's is there. It was close to the arena, so we can all meet there and kind of go our separate ways to get into the arena, which turned out to be perfect. I did want to shout out a couple of people that I met again, and I apologize for those who I met, who I didn't remember your name, but like that doesn't mean that we don't appreciate you. But Joseph Reed,
I've been there, man. I've been there.
Joseph Reed was the first guy to show up. He was awesome. He's been a very loyal listener. He's also written a couple of books that I know, Jason, you and I have
Joseph Reed is an author, yeah.
Yeah, he's an author in his spare time, of which like Jason and I, he has very little of, but it was very good to meet him in person for the first time. Luce Retsky came up and was talking to me quite a bit. I thought that was great. Mark Epperson, who reached out to me a long time ago on LinkedIn, and then I finally got to meet him in person. He told me a story about how he was in Vegas the day before because the women were playing. Shout out to the women, Duke women, by the way, 2 huge top 10 wins in Vegas. But he told me a story about the game against K-State. He got courtside seats and was sitting, by where Duke was warming up, and Ashlyn Jackson kind of dapped him up before the game, and then she goes on to have a career day. So Mark, you get full credit for that. I don't know if you did the same thing today, because it sounds like someone else had another great day. Richardson, I think, had 35 points, but shout out to Mark as well. And I did want to say there was one family that was there from Nebraska, and they were there attending their first Duke game in person. The kid, I believe the kid's name was Riley. But I thought that was really cool that they're like, yeah, he's like, this is my first game I've ever seen Duke play in person. And I was like, Vegas is a hell of a way to do that. So hopefully, despite the result, they had a good time. And shout out to my classmates, Rosie, Mike, and Adam for coming by. It was great to catch up with them. Class of 2004, as I've told many people, is the greatest class in Duke history, and they are part of that nucleus. And Jason, the final thing I will say is entering the arena. I bumped into a Kansas guy and I'm just like, oh, sorry, man, like just trying to, sneak through. And he turns to his friends and immediately goes, yo, that guy over there, he has to be the mayor of Duke. I don't know who he was, but I was sitting next to him and he must have had like 40 or 50 people come up and talk to him. He must be important. Sorry, Kansas, man, I am not important. But the community we've built is, and I'm so glad that a lot of you got to come out to Tom's and catch up for the game. And hopefully, again, despite the result, that all of you enjoyed your time inside T-Mobile.
Oh my God, that's awesome. So a couple of years ago, I tried to do a meetup at the varsity in Atlanta right
I
before a
remember
Georgia
that.
Tech game. And I had like 3 or 4 people come by and I was sort of like, maybe we're not that popular. Maybe people are busy with stuff. But yeah, since my experience at the Dribble for Victory, where I had, like you said, 20, 25 people, now you have this in Vegas, 20, 25 people. Yeah, maybe we need to do this a little more often.
The
I know.
key, Jason, is to do
Yeah,
it close to the arena, right? Like
right.
if you get close to the arena, people they're not going out of their way. And it made it, I think it made it better because despite the bar being completely packed, people were able to find me and say, oh, that's the little Duke hangout. And I mean, the Jayhawk was there. They had the Kansas cheerleaders there. And in amidst that, there's like 25 Duke people who were like, hey, cool. We're doing our own little thing over here on the side. So it was a lot of fun.
I love it. I love it. That's great. We'll try and do more of those this year. I know I'm making it to Durham for a couple games. I'm going to go to the Georgia Tech game. I'm going to go to the Clemson game. Road games, and
Hmm.
yeah, there'll be a number of times that we'll find ways to connect with you guys because we love that. Speaking of that, let's start with the headlines. And by the way, just so folks know, we got like 60 or 70 headlines. Was another. This has become a whole thing, and there were several people who sent in some really good submissions, and they were like, "This is my first time." And usually, first timer, I'm going to shout you out for sure. There were just too many. There's just too many. I gotta cream of the crop. Don't be frustrated if we haven't called out to you. We'll get to you at some point eventually. You'll find that magic one that for sure makes it onto the podcast.
And due to the fact that I have been traveling from Vegas all day, I have not unfortunately been able to read the headlines. So I'm going to be listening to these for the first time. I will read them later. They're all saved in the inbox, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. So you can still get something for me to give me some nice night reading. But Jason is going to be saying the ones that he picked, and I'm going to be learning about them for the first time. So you will see, or at least hear, my honest reaction to some of these.
So we will start with John Moore. John, oh my God. John says, and as a reminder, I attended the Kentucky game. Donald attended the Kansas game in Vegas. John Moore's headline is this: DBR podcast crew banned from attending all future Duke basketball games.
I did see this one. I did see this one. I had to respond to him. I was like, look, my record is actually pretty good. I've only seen one loss in Cameron since I graduated. And those you keep in track, that was not last year. And I've only seen like maybe 5 or 6 losses all time. Of course, this is one of them. So my record's still intact, but yes, I agree. We might need to cool it on the at least telling people we're going to games. I think the meetups, while fun, we take all the fun away from the team, and we need to focus it back on the team.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if that's going to stop. And I'm not someone who believes that we provided jinx to the team, but I will note that Donald and I were both at Coach K's final game where we lost to UNC. So
Correct.
in Cameron. So, all right, on with more of the headlines. Zach Kahn gave us second half Keja vu.
Mm.
I thought that was good. He says the losses in Vegas stay in Vegas as Duke hopes to rebound off of Kahn's last second clang off the rim. I will give Kahn Knippel credit for almost putting in a desperation shot that would have been a truly epic moment. Daniel Witt gave us can't coach clutch. Coop and Kahn can't convert. This was yet another game where Duke had a chance down the stretch, and our youngsters, who are still learning, who are going to keep on getting better, struggled to even get a shot off.
Mhm.
Paula Anderson gives us Duke keeps cards close to the vest, refuses to reveal winning play until championship game. Paula clearly thinks that we've got a winning play in mind. We're just going to take our time. Like, we're going to let everybody think that we don't know what we're doing in clutch situations until it really matters in March. I like that thought, Paula. Eric Bishop. Kansas finds the formula for winning in Vegas, doubling down. Very clever there with that one. The double down is a huge part of the Vegas lexicon, and Kansas did a great job of doubling Con Knipple and Cooper Flagg when they went in the lane late in this game. Chris Immershine. Chris, as always, and I'm about to do two from Chris. That's how good Chris is. So first of all, Chris gave us another one that is a Vegas theme. His headline says, Duke gambles with 2 spins, but Kansas bars the way. So that is if you're not getting that's some really good slot machine reference there. 2 spins on the slot machine, bar, coming up. Although usually you win when that happens. With Duke, we lost. And then Chris also gave us a limerick. Get ready for it. Kansas has a player named Dick in Sun. Some say he's quite the prickly one, but the Jayhawks still win. Duke goes blind with the spin. Hunter, though, got ejected for landing a kick. He's done. I mean, that's pretty well done. That's pretty well done. And then, wait, one more. Jason Wilkinson, in a true Vegas spirit, gave us a Dean Martin song. Ain't That a Kick in the Head? Everybody knows that song, right? Dean Martin, Ain't That a Kick in the Head? Now is my job. I have to sing this for Jason Wilkinson. How unlucky can one guy be? Khan kept shooting but couldn't hit a 3. Like Malik once said, ain't that a kick in the head?
Very, very good. Again, the karaoke hour on the DVR podcast.
All right, so that's it for the headlines. Donald, any comment on the insanity of headlines we had there?
It kind of sums up a lot of what we saw last night. So why don't we get to at least the good part of what we saw last night?
Yes, and I before we get to the good, I do want to note there are a couple of things really quickly I want to do. First of all, I just want to say, as a general theme, just some thoughts, things that I wrote down. I'm super disappointed, of course, that we lost, and we keep waiting for this Duke team to play anything close to a complete game. But there are so many bright spots here, and we know they will get better as they learn. As you and I, Donald, have often said on this podcast, the team you see today in Duke uniforms and the team you see in March will be very, very different, which is just not something you can say about these teams full of 22, 23, 24-year-olds that were mostly playing. There is a reason Vegas, the bookies, still think Duke is the favorite to win the national title, because the odds are excellent that come March, Duke will be the best team in the country. That said, this was a crucial loss. It makes the case increasingly difficult for Duke when it comes to claiming a number 1 seed come tourney time. Kansas is probably going to be one of the teams that will be battling for those top seeds. And now they have a huge trump card over us. It may be almost impossible for the committee to say, oh, I'm going to seed Kansas behind Duke. And I also want to note, there are people out there who say, Kansas did this without Hunter Dickinson. That person is an idiot. Yes, Hunter Dickinson missing the final 10 minutes impacted the game. But when he went out, Kansas was leading by 2, and they ended up winning by 3. Hardly a sweeping change in the way the game turned out. And the last thing I wanted to note before we get to the good and the such, and Don, I'll let you comment on some of this stuff, is I do want to give some props to Kansas. I thought KJ Adams was incredible on defense this entire game and forced Cooper Flagg out of the game to the extent where Con Knipple had to be our main facilitator because Cooper couldn't do it. KJ Adams, by the way, had a good game on the other end too, which is rare for him. DeJuan Harris was incredible at point guard. 9 assists, 14 points, only 2 turnovers. Kansas played a great game. The announcers said probably their best game of the year. And that's what it took to beat a Duke team that was playing like a B- or a C+ kind of game. We keep waiting for Duke to play the way we know they can. This certainly was not it. But it took Kansas playing probably their best game of the season to barely knock off a Duke team that was like I say, like a B- kind of effort. All right, you do a little bit and then we'll get to the good.
Yeah, no, I think I honestly think the talk about number 1 seeds is way too premature. And I know you're saying it because we talk about what we're looking at, when the committee thinks about it in March. And these wins or these games that we had, these big high profile games, are the ones that are front of memory always in that room. And so I
Yeah.
get the fact that we won it not just for us, but also again to show that the ACC and that Duke is a better team than some of these other teams that are going to get a lot of love over the next couple of months, Kansas included. But I think there's a lot of basketball, as you also mentioned, between now and March to deal with that and figure that out. So the idea here, though, is yes, Kansas played a very, very good game. Kentucky played a very good game against us, mainly a second half. And when you think about it, two teams that are in the top 10, one is the number one team in the country, one is like what, number eight, number seven. We have a grand total loss between the two of 8 points. It's not a lot of points. That's a play here and there. That's the details. And I think what we're working on here is some high profile, high level stuff. But when it gets down to it, what these players are learning is that details matter. And I think that we'll talk about that. We'll expand on it, but I think details matter because that is literally the difference between us talking today about a loss and me probably still trying to figure out how to stay in Vegas because I'm so high off of a win. That those details were not present last night, and that's what cost us the game.
No disagreement, my friend. All right, let's get to the good. I'll start with our defense. After that early flurry that gave Kansas a 13-point lead in the first 5 minutes, Duke really tightened up. Kansas had 18 points 5 minutes in this game. They had just 57 points the remaining 35 minutes. That would average out to a 65-point pace for a Kansas team that came into this game averaging almost 84 points per game. The defense that Duke played over the final 35 minutes was truly elite, and Kansas was struggling to get anything against it. And this is a really, really good offensive team from Kansas. So I thought the defense was something special, and a huge part of that defense was the two guys I want to talk about next, which are Sion James and especially Malik Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Look, Donald, I want to tell you, there was a moment. The score was 16-3. Duke was on the ropes, and Cooper lost the ball on offense again. But Malik Brown was the guy who was the quickest one to it, and he immediately found Sion in the corner for, boom, a three-pointer. And I wrote a little note to myself. I said, having these veterans out there really makes a difference, doesn't it? And that sort of began Duke coming back from this massive early deficit. Malik Brown was a terror on defense. He had 4 steals. I can't even count how many times he tipped and deflected the ball away from players and just disrupted plays. He did an excellent job of knowing where to help and then knowing where to recover. Hunter Dickinson did not do much when Malik Brown was guarding him, even though Hunter Dickinson has a huge height and weight advantage. Malik Brown was fabulous. He hit a big three-pointer. In the pregame, when we were previewing this game, I specifically said, if Hunter Dickinson sloughs off of Malik Brown, Malik's going to put a 3 in his face, and I was right about that. And Malik didn't miss a single shot in the whole game. By the way, Sion James, also perfect from the field, 2 of 2 on three-pointers on a day where some guys on Duke really struggled from 3. I thought Sion was great about hounding their guards. You saw Kansas sort of avoid whichever perimeter guy Sion was covering. Mm-hmm. They wanted to attack someone else. And on offense, Sion was never bothered by the Kansas pressure. And I noticed the Duke was allowing him to sort of bring the ball up and initiate things more than they were Caleb Foster when Caleb was running the point. When Caleb ran the point, the ball was usually getting almost immediately to Cooper or Kahn, if Cooper or Kahn didn't just bring the ball up on their own. When Sion was in the game, we saw a bit more of Duke starting and allowing Sion to initiate some of the action, at least the initial action. So I think that's a very telling and interesting fact about this game. Your turn to go a little bit on those guys and on the defense.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I was going to start with Sion James and Malik Brown because I thought like you mentioned, when we went down 13 early, they were the guys who came in and calmed everybody down. They were the guys who matched the energy and the physicality that Kansas was presenting. And they were the ones that were not, at that point, shook because they came in and they said, "Oh, you want to fight? You want this to be a dog fight? Okay, we're dogs. We can fight." So they were able to match that energy, and I think that helped bring us back slowly but surely. And we'll talk about the ebbs and flows of this game, but I thought the constant really besides Malik Brown was Sion James, and I thought Sion James and I'll even shout out Tyrese Proctor in this. I know we'll talk about him in a minute, but I think Sion James when he came in, like you said, he brought the ball up, he provided the pressure, he was able to find guys and get things going, and he was just able to be a Grizzly veteran. And sometimes in these games, again, we have to remember that some of these guys are freshmen that are in their sixth game at college, seventh game in college, and you have a guy who's a fifth year coming in and calming things down because he's seen it and he's lived it and he knows what to do with it. So I really enjoyed what I saw from there, and I think on the defense, I think again it was about matching the physicality. And early enough, we were not ready for it. But once we were, we kind of settled into the game, and I thought it provided itself really well. But it was about passing lanes. We talked about even when Hunter Dixon was in the game, making sure he doesn't get the ball and making somebody else beat us. And
Yeah.
and I think Malik Brown did a great job of just, hey, sticking that hand in passing lanes, whether he tipped it out of bounds, whether he stole it, or whether he, again, just tipped it back out to a Kansas guy and they had to reset their whole offense and rethink. If you remember, I think they had a couple of 24-second violations, shot clock violations, because of the fact that they couldn't get the ball to where they wanted to go because our defense was great at knocking the ball back and making them have to completely reset everything they were doing.
Yeah. Hey, as we continue to get to the good, I want to talk a little bit about Tyrese Proctor. You mentioned him very briefly. We talked about we wanted him to have a complete game for once, and he was an impactful player in both halves of this game. 3 of 4 from 3-point range with 3 rebounds in the first half, 2 of 3 from 3-point range with 3 rebounds in the second half. He led the team in rebounding. And I wish that maybe Tyrese had had the ball in his hands a little bit more in the second half.
Mhm.
I kind of wonder if him moving off the ball, because he's been off the ball this whole season, has that maybe impacted his comfort at initiating and creating with the ball in his hands? I don't know. Maybe there's something there to that. It's pretty clear that this team considers Caleb Foster and Sion James to be the point guards, and Tyrese is the shooting guard, and almost the only shooting guard. Frankly, he doesn't take many breaks from that role, and he's been Duke's most reliable 3-point shooter in terms of consistency on the season. He may not. I haven't looked to see who has the highest percent. Sion James may have the highest percentage now that I think about it, but Tyrese is the guy who is taking a lot of 3-pointers and hitting them consistently. But I thought he was excellent in this game, and his defense, as always, is very, very good. I just kind of wish maybe there was a little more that he could do in terms of creating. He tried a couple times in this game to get into the lane, but that's to me, that's what Duke is missing right now is guards who get into the lane and create opportunities for their teammates. We're doing it with our forwards. We're not doing it with our guards. But I thought Tyrese clearly belongs in the good.
He was our best and most consistent offensive player last night. And like you, I thought he should have had the ball a lot more later in the game, including the last, couple minute of the game. I thought it would have been great to see a guy who hadn't really missed a lot to get the ball in his hands, or at least find a way to get the ball in his hands at the end. But I thought he was our most consistent player. He was able to, again, some of those threes that he hit were super huge to bringing us back and again giving us some momentum. You could feel the energy in the arena that whenever he hit a three, it felt like something more was coming. And they were able, again, to lock down on defense and kind of make a run out of it. But I thought he, initiated a lot of that presence from beyond the arc. And it's funny, he's one of the reasons why I look at this game and I was like, the field test, the eye test does not match the stats, because it felt like nobody was making threes but Tyrese Proctor. And then it turned out that we were shooting 50% from the floor the entire game. And it never felt like that in the arena. It felt lopsided when it came to that. But Tyrese Proctor, whenever he had the ball in his hands, it felt like to all of us that were in the gym that he could do no wrong. And so I really wished he could have had the ball more down the stretch, because it felt like he was consistent, he was constant, and he had the wherewithal to understand that when he got the ball in his hands, something good was going to happen with it.
Yeah. Hey, in terms of something good happening when the ball's in your hands, I have Con Knipple in the good. And I'm talking about his playmaking here. He had 8 assists, And by the way, not a single one of them was a cheap assist. Sometimes guys get assists where they, just pass to someone open on the wing, and that guy drains a shot, and they get an assist. No. Kahn's were like pick and roll situations where he had to make quick decisions. There were times where he was penetrating into the defense and then dishing off to a teammate. I read a comment from an NBA draft evaluator person who said that there were lots of NBA scouts in the arena who were drooling after seeing what Kahn was doing in terms of playmaking for this Duke team. Cooper wasn't really able to do it in this game, largely because KJ Adams is, I don't know, one of the 5 best defenders in college basketball or something like that. I mean, truly elite. So Cooper was struggling with it, and Duke turned to Kahn, and I thought Kahn's playmaking was just outstanding up until the last play or two.
Right.
Yeah. So.
But I do think Kahn's assist leads into the general thing that I had, which was we had 17 assists on 24 made baskets. And again, we understand that ball movement is everything. That percentage is awesome. That's what you love to see, is that every time someone is getting a shot is mainly because we are getting a guy in a position through the pass to make something happen. And I really liked what Kahn was doing, at least when he knew the shot wasn't falling, to try and find other guys to play make a little bit. But also it was some scrappiness too. And I think that was guys trying to find other guys. Some of those, like you said, they weren't easy assists. They were guys who were like, oh man, I'm trapped in the corner, finding someone cross court who hits a 3, finding someone in the paint that gets a dunk. Those sort of things were present. And I think that's what kept us in the game, is that our ball movement was able to get guys in position and salvage plays that might have been messed up by Kansas's physicality.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break here, and I know it's sort of in the middle of the conversation, but we ended up having such a long conversation that we had to put a break in here someplace. So with this, we'll take a short break, and we'll be back in just a moment. Hey, Duke fans, shopping time of year is here, and you should spark something uncommon this holiday season with just the right gift from Uncommon Goods.
That's right, Jason. The busy holiday season is here, and Uncommon Goods makes it less stressful with incredible hand-picked gifts for everyone on your list, all in one spot. Gifts to spark joy, wonder, delight. You know, that it's exactly what I wanted feeling. We all want that. Somehow, they've created a place where you can find that exact perfect gift for everyone.
Donald, and speaking of perfect gifts, I've mentioned this before. I got this root beer maker from Uncommon Goods. It is outrageous. The notion that I can make root beer in my home, in my kitchen, is crazy. I can have it fresh whenever I want it. It is super cool. I strongly recommend that one.
So, root beer floats in your future, acupuncture mat my future. That's been great, especially after these long, stressful days. From holiday gifts to the coolest finds for kids to hits for everyone, from book lovers to diehard sports fans, Uncommon Goods has something for everyone. Not the same old selections you can find just anywhere. And with every single purchase you make, they give back $1 to a nonprofit partner of your choice. I think that's pretty cool. So far, they have raised more than $3 million.
Yeah, and by the way, in addition to doing good for the world, we're going to give you a little bit of a discount. You'll get 15% off your next gift at Uncommon Goods if you go to uncommongoods.com/DukeBB. uncommongoods.com/DukeBB. Get 15% off, and don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods. We are all out of the ordinary.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Looking for a pickup truck to get just about anything done? Look no further. The Chevy Silverado EV isn't just the most powerful Silverado ever, with next-level towing capability and technology. It also offers game-changing versatility with the available multi-flex midgate and tailgate, which means Silverado EV helps you carry large, bulky, and oddly shaped items up to nearly 11 feet in length. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. Visit Chevrolet.com to learn more.
The holiday season officially starts when you get that first card in the mail. Shutterfly makes it easy to add more meaning to the everyday with hundreds of holiday card designs that can be personalized in seconds with your favorite photos from this year. Select your greeting, customize the color, and even add little extras like personalized foil to make a holiday card that really shines. Enjoy 40% off with code SMILE40 at Shutterfly.com and send something meaningful this year. See site for more details.
Yeah, and we're talking about Khan and his outstanding game passing the ball and assisting on the ball. This is a good place to transition to the bad. His inability to hit an open three-pointer against good opponents is really becoming frustrating and really becoming a problem. Look, I love that Khan has found other ways to impact the game when his shot is off, and we saw heavy doses of that last night against Kansas. It's not like Khan was 0 for 8 on three-pointers. I don't even need to repeat that. Everyone knows that stat. That was abundantly clear from anyone watching the game. The fact that he found other ways to impact the game is great for him, but 0 for 8's a huge problem. In Duke's 3 games against quality opponents, Kansas, Arizona, and Kentucky, Khan is now 4 of 22 from 3 on the season. That's 18%. From a guy that we expected to be right around 40+% from 3. The reputation coming out of Duke's preseason was that this guy is an unreal shooter that cannot be stopped when he rises up and hoists from 3. The ceiling for this Duke team is hugely different if Con Knipple is around 40% from 3 versus Con Knipple being 32% from 3. That, it's only 8 percentage points, but it is a big, big, big difference for this Duke team. And I just have to start the bad with, and like you said, Tyrese Proctor tried to make up for it. Tyrese was awesome from 3 in this game.
Mm-hmm.
But when Khan, the guy who everyone knows is our best shooter, when we work hard to get him open threes, and he had some really wide open ones, when he goes 0 for 8, it's just hard for this Duke team to make up for that and still win.
It was wholly frustrating inside the arena to see how open he was on some of them, especially after early in the game and really throughout the game. Kansas did a great job at doubling him and Cooper Flag. Kansas said, if Duke is going to beat us, it's going to be through somebody not named Cooper or Khan. And they had 2 guys on him for a lot of the game. And so when we were able to figure out a way to break through that double team and get Khan an open shot, you gotta knock him down. And yes, he's going to. But it's those games when you look back, and again, those high profile matchups where people go, "Oh, that Khan guy is not that good. I saw him play against Kansas. He couldn't hit water from a boat." Like, that is not necessarily reputation, but that's what you want to avoid when it comes down to it, because people. It's unfortunate, but they're not going to remember when he went, 7 for 8 against like a Wofford or something like that, right? They're going to remember him going 0 for 8 against Kansas, because if he hits 2 of those shots, we win this ball game by 3.
Oh yeah.
And I get that some of them were contested shots, but the open shots are the ones that are the ones you don't want to see become a trend.
Let me get to the next thing in the bad, and this is going to be 3 things wrapped together, and you'll see why I'm wrapping them together. It is turnovers, rebounding, and free throws. Duke had 16 turnovers in this game. You and I have set the threshold of 12. That's 4 above that threshold that we consider sort of the danger zone for Duke. 16 turnovers is a lot. Rebounding. One game after besting the best rebounding team in the country, Duke got punked on the boards 31-25. Duke only had 5 offensive rebounds this whole game. Our 2 big men, Man and Malik, combined for 2 rebounds. Their big men, Hunter Dickinson and Flory Badunga, had 15. 15-2 big men. 15-2 big men rebounding advantage for Kansas. That's a problem. And when you combine the turnovers and the rebounds together, You get a formula where Kansas takes 9 more shots than Duke. Anyone who's listened to this podcast for years knows I'm obsessed with field goal attempts. Kansas had 57 field goal attempts. Duke had 48. You want to ask me why they won? It's because they shot the ball more than we did. And then the only way to make up for a disadvantage like that in field goal attempts, 57 to 48, 9 fewer shots. The only way to make up for that is at the free throw line. But Duke, in a tight game, hit 72%. It's okay. 72% from the free throw line. It's not like it's horrible. We missed 5 free throws, though. Kansas hit 92%. They only missed 1 free throw in this game. The point differential in this game came down to missed free throws. We missed 5. They missed 1. We lost by 3. 4 free throws was the difference in this game.
I want to go back to the rebounding because I think it's important for one of the things that I clearly saw, and I'm sure all of you out there did as well. We did not take advantage of the moment after Hunter Dickinson was ejected from the game. The best player on their team was ejected from the game.
Yep.
And that should have been the wake-up call saying, we can go get this. We could go blow their doors off and make them go back to say, hey, that Hunter Dickinson, they can, all the sports shows would be talking about, was Hunter Dickinson rightfully ejected? Because they would be talking about it in the form of a Kansas loss. Did it cost Kansas the game? It didn't, because we didn't take advantage of that. And I think a lot of that stems to the rebounding, the fact that we had guys on the floor that were bigger, taller, stronger, couldn't get rebounds. Flory Badunga, you talked about him before the game, guy that we're familiar with because we were recruiting him. I'm sure he took that personally, right? Like he said we saw a little bit more of him than we normally would have, and he took advantage of the moment, and it wasn't the Duke guys. And I think that was very visibly frustrating for a lot of people to see that their big guy, the guy that everyone says focus on him because he's a walking double-double and does so many other things with the basketball, he's out. If I'm a basketball player, when the other team has something happen like that, I'm salivating. Give me the basketball so I can go make sure they understand that that was a mistake. And so we just weren't able to really live up to that and take advantage of that situation to affect the game. And that should have been the biggest effect of the game, and it turned out it wasn't. And because of that, Kansas won. That's a big Kansas W right there, and that's the reason why they're able to hold on and win this game.
All right, as we continue with the bad, there are a couple guys I hate doing, we don't like criticizing players, specifically by name, but there are 2 guys I have to call out a little bit. I thought Mason Gillis, was missing shots. Mason is supposed to be a elite 3-point shooter. He has not been anything close to elite for Duke this year. But what really bothered me was I thought he made some very, very poor decisions for a guy very, very experienced. There were a couple times where I was like, what is Mason even doing there? He had one time he was running a fast break. He was the lead on a fast break, a 3-on-1 fast break. And he threw like a lob to Khan or something like that. I don't even know what he was thinking. It ended up being, a missed field, nothing for Duke. I'd like to have those 2 points back, please. I think it could make a difference down the stretch if we had those 2 extra points. There were a few times in this game where I sort of watched Mason. I was just like, I'm not seeing 5th-year senior, knows how to hit threes, know how to play smart basketball kind of guy. So he's a good defender, but I was frustrated by his play. And then the other guy I need to call out is Caleb Foster. He only played 6 minutes in the second half. Only plays 15 minutes overall in the game. He registered in those 15 minutes. His plus minus was negative 13. In a tight back and forth game. Kansas raced out early. So that's probably why he's got that negative 13 to some extent. But Duke came back, and he clearly wasn't part of that comeback. He plays 15 minutes, gets a negative 13. He just seems passive, much like he did a lot of last year. And I thought that last year was like, oh, I'm a freshman, and I've got a bunch of, more experienced guys around me, and it's not my job to initiate. It's your job to initiate this year, Caleb. But he just seems so passive with the ball. He rarely looks to penetrate. He rarely looks to pass when he does penetrate. I don't sense any confidence from him. I don't sense that he can turn a corner and beat his man. If he and Tyrese Proctor are just going to sit in the corner and wait for others to create for them, that is a big problem for Duke. As we have said, Donald, you and I, many times, and we've had guests on this show who said the same thing. This Duke team goes as far as Foster and Proctor can take it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's starting to look like those guys may not be able to take us very far at all. And I wonder if we start to see John Shire try something different. Maybe a little more of Sion James. Maybe, I mean, so many people are calling for a little dose of Isaiah Evans. Isaiah is a guy who's creative with the ball, who can get around his man and create opportunities. I just know that the Tyrese Proctor and especially the Caleb Foster that we've seen for the first 6 games of the year for Duke, especially in the 3 big games against power conference opponents, those guys have not been the kind of players we expected them to be this year. And one reason that Duke has lost 2 games, 2 big games, 2 very good teams, is because we're not getting production from our guards. And I don't just mean points. I mean also assists, creativity, hockey assists, as you term them. We're not getting those from Caleb Foster, our point guard. And you look at what Kansas got from DeJuan Harris. I don't expect Caleb to be DeJuan Harris, but if Caleb was even half of DeJuan Harris, Duke would have won that game last night.
Yeah, again, as I said at the top, a lot of details here, and that's one of them. The guard play is something that, as you mentioned, we've been talking about since the summer. That's been the biggest question. Everyone knows kind of what you got with everyone else, and the question is, what are the guards going to show up? And you can't make it a trend that the guards are going to be the most passive when it gets down to it. You want those guys to be what's the line from the replacements? Winners want the ball with the game on the line. You like John Shire wants. He should want to have 5 guys in that huddle going, Coach, if you don't draw up this play for me, I'm gonna freak out. I'm gonna wig out, because you want 5 guys that are just absolutely like, get me the basketball, put it in my hand. I will go do something, and you can. This team can get behind me. It starts with the point guards. It starts with the guard situation, and I think we see a lot of what we saw in this game, right, where we had to start relying on more veteran leadership, I should say, than what we had starting the game. And that was Sion James coming in and calming things down, as opposed to Caleb Foster establishing from the get-go, like, hey, this is our game. You know, we're going to have some of these ruts. Let's get out of it and let's get back to playing defense or whatever that is to be the catalyst to turn things around. So we're saying that because we really want this to happen for Caleb Foster and for this team. And so it's very not, we want this to happen. So it's frustrating that it hasn't happened yet. That doesn't mean it's not going to be there, but I think that's something that needs to be worked on over the next 2 weeks. As you mentioned, we're playing Seattle on Friday, and then guess what? Auburn comes to town. Auburn's not a slouch team. They are very, very good. And and everyone knows the blueprint on how to take care of guards, and we need to be able to combat that.
Yeah, a couple other things I've got in the bad, and the first one is this. I thought the officials were an abomination. I hate people who complain about the officials, but I'm going to go ahead and do it right now. Hunter Dickinson had multiple clear offensive fouls that were not called on him in the first half and early in the second half. It was probably harder for you to see in the arena, Donald, than we saw on television. There were a number of times on television that they were replaying plays, and the announcers were like, well, yeah, he committed a foul there, but they just decided not to call it.
So about that, we found out maybe 30 seconds into this basketball game that the scoreboard didn't work. So the scoreboard in the arena did not work at all. It was stuck on 0-0, 19:59 on the clock. And so what they did was you know how they have the wraparound LED lights that normally show the score in the end zones. They turned those off, and they put on the ESPN feed. So yes, we saw what you saw on TV.
Oh, there you go.
That was our feed, what we saw. So when they started replaying stuff, we're kind of going, okay, why are they replaying that? Wait a minute. That looked like a foul to me, or that looked like out of bounds on this guy, or that looked like a travel. So we were able to react, I guess maybe kind of on a slight delay because we didn't have the audio feed, but at least we knew what you were looking at.
Yeah, it is clear. You mentioned this a moment ago that the book on Duke is you need to play them physical. You need to try and intimidate them. You need to try and make these youngsters, these freshmen, feel their age, so to speak, and the fact that they are not as physically mature as most of the guys on your team. And it's also clear that the officials, teams are going to dare the refs to call more fouls. And what we saw in this game was the officials were not going to do it. I mean, there was a just a number of really, really bad calls. And I want to really quickly mention that I think that the flagrant 2 on Hunter Dickinson was a bad call. Should not have been an F2. I watched the replay on it multiple times. I don't think that he was like trying to injure Malik Brown. I'm not even 100% clear that he kicked him intentionally. I think he probably did, which is why I would say F1, but I'm not so certain of it. And I'm not so certain that it was with really malicious intent that I'm ready to say that's an F2, get the guy out of the game. So I feel like the refs kind of blew that one as well. And by the way,
Jason, real quick on that particular play. I don't know the official rule and what they're doing, and I don't know what they were talking about on the broadcast. But I do remember that there's like 2 levels, right? Like you can get a flagrant 1 for something that's not considered intentional, but it's like
right.
It's you hit the guy in the face. Like it doesn't matter whether you meant it or not. I mean, Flip would get that a lot, right? People would hit him in the face and he'd go, "Hey, I'm not saying to kick him out the game, but by rule, that's a flagrant 1 because he made contact above the neck." So I think the flagrant 2 part was like, is there any intent? And I wonder if they said because there's intent, it graduates to 2 no matter how malicious we thought that intent was.
Possible, yeah.
So I'm not certain about that. But what I do not appreciate about the rest is that it took what felt like 37 minutes for them to come to that decision. And that slowed down a lot of what we were doing. Again, we could have gained a lot of momentum out of that play, and we weren't able to because it felt like everyone was able to catch their breath. I don't know if you guys, how many TV timeouts you guys went to, but in the arena, it felt like we went 6, 7 minutes without an explanation of what was going on.
Well, and what's more, they then, in the wake of them calling the F2, they allowed Hunter Dickinson to sit on the bench for
like
10 minutes
like
before
10
they
minutes.
finally removed him from the arena. By the way, I don't know how that's not a bench technical. I don't know how you don't just say, because it's the Kansas coaches knew he'd been kicked out. They've seen players kicked out before. Bill Self knew he has to go back to the locker room. Bill Self's assistants knew he has to go back to the locker room. He's not allowed to sit here. And they just allowed him to sit there for like 10, 15 minutes until the refs noticed it. Frankly, the refs should have said, yeah, that dude's not allowed on your bench. That's a technical. But they didn't. And then the other thing that bothered me about it was like the refs kicked him out and they went, but we feel so bad about kicking him out that we're going to call every touch foul on Duke for the next 30 seconds of game time. And as a result of that, they put Kansas in the bonus nice and early, and they put Malik Brown in some foul trouble. I thought Hunter Dickinson did something wrong, and you're supposed to penalize him. It felt like Hunter Dickinson did something wrong. You penalized him, and then you also penalized Duke for being the victim. I don't understand it. But the officials, as I said at the top, were an abomination in this game.
We didn't. I mean, obviously, we're the arena. We can boo whatever we want. We booed a lot of calls. Kansas fans booed a lot of calls as well. So, but I will say this: there was more than one person who texted me during this game and said we are playing 8-on-5. You can take that how you will. I wouldn't have gone as far as you did because again, we didn't have the quite same angles. You watching at home versus me, me in the arena, and we don't have the commentary where we can and let's be real, like the way that they presented on TV promotes the discussion, right? Like if they're saying, "Oh, this game is called very clean," people kind of go, "Jason, you're out of line." But if they're saying, "Yo, these calls are kind of tight," they have a lot of buzzwords, right? Like they're calling this game tight, or it's not as physical as it was early on when they let things go. Those sort of things that allow you to say, "Okay, these refs are trying to take control of the game in a way that is unlike what they should be doing." And it felt like, again, it stopped momentum on both sides for Kansas as well. There was times where Kansas felt like they were going to blow the doors off, and then it just kept getting bogged down by the refs calling something or reviewing something or coming together and conferring before making some random call that made both teams go, "What are you talking about?" So, it did affect the flow of this game for sure.
Donald, you got anything else in the bad? Because I got one more thing, and I want it to be our last conversation.
Yeah, so I think getting back to the physicality and I actually have a little bit of two. We've talked about the physicality. I just want to stress that I think Kansas did a great job at making it where we felt uncomfortable. We have to learn that is what teams are going to do. That is the takeaway from this game is teams are going to come out and say, punch them in the mouth early and make them quiver, make them uncomfortable, because when they're uncomfortable, that's when they start making mistakes. We have to learn how to fight through that. right? Mike Tyson said every man has a plan until he gets punched in the face. We got punched in the face and we did not have a plan on how to recover from that. And if we don't have that 13-point deficit early on, this game, as you mentioned, this game is close and it's coming down to a final basket, but it seems like we're the ones ahead and we're making Kansas have to play the hero. And I think also, and this ties into the end, and I know this kind of segues to what you're going to be talking about, but I think that I mentioned that Tyrese Proctor was the best and most consistent offensive player on the floor. I would have had the ball in his hands at the end. That's no disrespect to our freshmen that did have their hands on the ball, but when you have a guy who is hot, when you have a guy who has only missed one shot all game, you figure out a way to get him the basketball and ask him to make a play, especially a junior who has been through that situation before. Jason, you mentioned free throws. You remember a couple years ago when Tyrese Proctor got that foul at the end of the game and made two key free throws to win the game with all the pressure in the world. He's been in those moments. He sees those moments.
Yep.
And he's got some of that dog that you need at the end of the game to say, I can be clutch and I can make a play. Again, I felt comfortable with some of the things that were happening, but what I did not feel comfortable with is that the best guy on the team, at least that night, did not have the ball in his hands at the end of the game with the ability to try and make a play. And I think that is something that I wish we had back.
Well, Donald, that comment segues me into the last thing I want to discuss, which is the elephant in the room. And it's not really an elephant in the room, it's an elephant on the sidelines. I said that we got 60 or so emails from the listeners, folks who sent emails to dbrpodcast@gmail.com. I'd say a half a dozen to a dozen of those were people who gave me some version of John Shire is getting out coached. Why is John Shire going to freshmen in late game situations? How is Tyrese Proctor not involved in what Duke is doing? Duke needs someone to strategize. Let John do the recruiting. Those were all different things that I read, both from folks sending us emails and in my own personal inbox from various friends out there and text messages and the such. There is a huge undercurrent in the Duke universe today of people who say, not that John Shire's over his head or that John Shire's a bad coach, but the people who say maybe coaching offense isn't something that John Shire is all that good at yet. Folks say this team needs to find a reliable offense and that Coop versus the world with his teammates standing around and watching is not going to get it done. Lee Maxon, who's someone who emails to us and a very good listener and communicator with us, Lee said that he listened to the Brotherhood podcast that had Grayson Allen, Tyus Jones, and Mason Plumlee on it, and that Grayson Allen on that podcast before the Kansas game, Grayson said that Duke is making life hard on themselves this season because the team struggles to score. He said they need to find ways of scoring a bit easier. John Shire is a great motivator. John Shire is certainly a wonderful communicator with these kids. But frankly, his offensive game plan seems incredibly stagnant right now. If the threes aren't falling, Duke seems to have very little to fall back upon. John's in-game adjustments, they just don't seem to happen. I don't notice changes. You pointed it out. Hunter Dickinson went out of this game. Duke didn't seem to change what we were trying to do to attack Kansas or defend Kansas for that matter. John Shire appears unwilling to experiment with lineups or roles to see what else, could happen or might develop. He has nice out of bounds plays. We've talked about that in past seasons. Mm-hmm. We like his out of bounds plays, but the rest of the offense seems very free form, make it up as we go kind of stuff. I'm not enough of a basketball genius to know what's going on in practice or to see every nuance of what's going on with Duke's offense, but I've talked to some people who know hoops pretty darn well, and they kind of agree with me. They're like, yeah, it doesn't look like Duke has all that much of a plan on offense other than let's see what Kahn can do. Let's see what Coop can do. And I will say this. It's hard to tell how much of this criticism of John and of Duke's offense is the lack of a truly creative point guard, which you and I've talked about on this podcast today. But throughout John's tenure as Duke's head coach, he really hasn't had a creative point guard. Jeremy Roach, Tyrese Proctor, Caleb Foster, they each have nice aspects to their game. but none of them are guys who like break them down off the dribble, create an opportunity for another player. None of them are sort of the traditional creative point guard. And, frankly, Duke's results on offense have not been there, given the talent that the surrounding, that's on the floor. And I just wonder if maybe John needs a offensive genius on the staff to help out the same way Jay Lucas is helping out with the defense. Jay is the defensive coordinator. Duke has the number one defense in all of college basketball. Maybe we need to find an offensive coordinator to boost that offensive efficiency as well.
I will say, I mean, there's a lot to take in, and I agree with you on a lot of it. I think, well, first of all, I think he did have one point guard. He may not have been creative, but playoff Roach, I think everybody in the gym would say, if playoff Roach, we had him, get the ball in his hands, and he's going to make a play. And it's
Okay.
the clutch part of it, not the creative.
But playoff Roach to some extent was a myth, is a legend that was born out of Jeremy Roach's time with Coach K.
Correct. And he did, but we did see that again in the last couple of years. But again, it wasn't every game, right? We didn't have those moments where like, every time you're going to get the ball to him and the whole gym knows it, right? Everywhere, everyone who watched that game last night knew that Cooper was going to get the ball. Cooper was going to try and do a spin. And again, how do you fight through that when everyone knows, and especially the team that is guarding you, right? That they understood what was going to happen. They saw the game tape on what he's going to do, and they anticipated it and made him turn the ball over. They didn't necessarily steal the ball, but they made him make a mistake. Freshmen are going to do that. And again, that's why I would have said, get the ball into the hands of Proctor, who has had that experience. Again, he has experienced at least being clutch in certain situations, and he had the hot hand. And okay, if you good to the hot hand and he misses, you don't feel as bad about it because you go, that's the right play to the right guy at the right time. The guy who has the most points, the guy who's hit all of his threes or almost all of his threes, who's hit almost everything from the floor. If he misses one at the end, hey, he still had a great game. We had a great game. We were right there. And there's these details. And I think the details all add up when you talk about the fact that at the end of the game, it feels like we're not set up to do the right thing. And that may be coaching. For all we know, he's giving the right play in the timeout and the players come out and mess it up. We don't know. But it all goes back to that needs to be addressed, that part of it. And let's be clear. We have a young team. We have some experience, but we have a young team. And guess what? That extends to the coaches as well, right? None of these most of these coaches haven't been like John Shire's not been a head coach, but for 3 seasons now. The elder statesman is Chris Carrawell, right? Who's been around the longest. And I think other than that, we've had guys who have been coaching or just been around for only a year or two. So this coaching staff is young too. They are going to make their mistakes. What we hope doesn't become the trend is that the coaching mistakes cost the team that's on the floor. And I think some people, and I don't necessarily know that I agree with everything about it being an out-coached situation. I think parts of it are true, but I don't think that cost us the game. As I mentioned, I think it's the details. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I can put a 7'5" guy in the post. I can't make him rebound. I can't make him dunk the life out of somebody. That
Right.
has got to be on everybody. And the whole team has to kind of look themselves in the mirror and go, the blueprint is out on how you beat Duke. It may be by 2 or 3 points, but a loss is a loss. And of course, they're not talking about, Hunter Dickinson getting ejected. They're talking about Kansas winning that game in spite of that. That shouldn't have happened. And I think there's times where you kind of say, this situation requires me to have to cede, my role to something else for the greater good of getting the win. And I think that's what needs to be learned. And unfortunately has to be learned quickly. We got, again, Seattle and then Auburn coming to town. And then it's ACC season. We're very close to that, where guys are going to be sitting there and saying, okay, we're just going to double team these 2 guys over here and make the rest of Duke beat us. And if the rest of Duke isn't up for doing that, then it's going to be a very frustrating season. And I think this is something that can be worked on. The details go the other way. We're talking about a Duke win. So it's not cause for complete alarm, but we identified trends on this podcast, and we hope this doesn't become a trend.
All right, we have one more thing we have to do, Donald. That is the play of the game. I don't know. Do you have a candidate? I've got one I picked out. Did you figure out one?
There were actually funny enough. There's a lot of good candidates here. I think it was that Cooper dunk, that yam in traffic, because again, everybody in the arena, even Kansas people, got up and were like, "Oh, that's the guy that we were told about." But that Cooper dunk, I don't know who it was over, but God bless them and their family this Thanksgiving, because that was lethal. And that was a really, really good play.
So my play of the game was a play with just about 3 or 4 minutes left in the first half. Malik Brown was bothering Hunter Dickinson in the post. Hunter Dickinson should have committed an offensive foul. It did commit an offensive foul. Refs didn't call it. We know about that. So Hunter sort of frustratingly took a shot, which he missed. Duke grabbed the rebound, came down, and just like I said in the preview, I talked about this earlier, this is the play where Malik Brown was out there beyond the three-point line. Hunter Dickinson was several steps off of him, afraid to come out there, and Malik Brown drained his first three-pointer of the season. I picked that play because it is an example of Malik impacting both ends of the floor, the way he did several times in this game. And I also wanted to note that three-pointer took Duke to being down only 2 points. We had been down 13. Mm-hmm. It was a long road back, and that three-pointer got us pretty much all the way there. So I wanted to shout out Malik Brown, his excellent play at both ends of the floor, and that's why I gave him the play of the game.
When he did that, when he caught the ball and he started the motion of shooting, I jumped out of my seat, put my hands in the air, and walked off. I was like, I know that's going in. I know that's going in. And when we had a TV, so I was able to see it go in, and I just said, I knew it. That's the play. And then they called the timeout, and I was basically just running around for like 30 seconds, high-fiving whoever would want to receive a high five from me.
I love it. That is awesome. That is great. All right, with that, we will leave it here on the latest edition, episode 666 of the DBR podcast.
Never again.
Right, exactly. He's Donald. I'm Jason. By the way, check your feed. If you're listening to this episode, make sure you listen to, we're going to have a preview of Duke's game against Seattle coming up on Friday. Very, very quick. But we're going to have a preview of that game coming up in your feed very, very shortly. Until then, here's the Duke Band to play us out, take us back home to camp.